projector?
Yes, I do. Here, it's connected, but some reason it's not
Okay, hold on a second. Until then, even as it's her birthday. It's her birthday. I know. This is the other day. It's working. Sure.
trained at Harvard and Yale, and he wouldn't give me his CV to introduce him, but obviously we all know Mina. Mina and Polina are probably top like 2 most loved couples in the world, so yeah. And Elena has like the option to jump in and correct him at any point in his talk, right?
Please,
Okay.
please, yeah. That's just the way our life works. Our marriages. She will jump in. Yeah. Thank you for that lovely introduction, Irini. I think I'm using the mic just because they're recording, so I'm sorry. Yeah, you're all here, but thank you for being here. Just in the Father, Son, Holy Spirit, and so today we're going to have just a little discussion about emotions. So I think emotions in some ways when we talk about relationships kind of get a little bit of a bad rap, right? We talk about like how emotions just like make us do things or act in ways or say things that we don't want or don't like aren't ideal, right? So I want you to think about like the last conflict you had. You could think about in your marriage, you could think about in any relationship with anybody, and what were some of the emotions present during that conflict? So this is a question that like requires your response. Anger. Anger's like anger, frustration, good, disappointment. Just some other ones. I think anger is usually going to be at the top of the list, right? So for some people, there's some fear, like worry or fear involved there. For some people, some jealousy could be another common emotion in conflict. Another one is sometimes just disgust, right? We're just disgusted with what's in front of us, the situation, right? So those are some of the kind of common conflict-related emotions, and we're going to talk about those and what to do with it, right? So during this talk, if you will bear with me, most of these slides will have animals. Part of this, just to keep you kind of engaged, these are going to be animals you probably haven't heard of, and so this is the peacock tarantula. It has a very small ecosystem in India, just lives in like a couple square miles, and we're destroying it. So, so it's beautiful, but that's it. Okay, so I want to, some of the animal stuff is going to be a little depressing, I'm so sorry. It's just the way the world is. Yeah. Oh, the marriage stuff will be uplifting, I hope. The animal stuff might get you down. Yeah, it's the balance. Yeah, I don't want to be too happy here. That's not natural. So first I just want to be clear, right? Like, while we talk about emotions in like this conflict setting, emotions are a God-given gift. I'm going to insist on using the word gift, right? Like any gift, we can use it the way God intended, or we can use them in ways that can be hurtful to ourselves and to others. So God himself, God in Jesus, experiences all of the emotions in the Bible. In fact, he's quite an emotional being. If you dig in and you're looking for emotions, you'll find them everywhere. So I think the common one that we see that's just very kind of like obvious is when Jesus enters the temple and he sees things that are just not okay. And so in that context, in that situation, he has anger and he expresses it. Okay? So not only is it okay for him to have the emotion, he shows us that it's okay to express it. Okay, so both. In particular situations. So this is kind of what we're talking about today. So let me just read this passage from Mark. So they came to Jerusalem. Then Jesus went into the temple and began to drive out those who bought and sold in the temple, overturned tables and the money changers and seats of those who sold doves. So he acted on it angered. And he would not allow anyone to carry wares throughout the temple. Then he taught, saying to them, "It is not written, 'My house shall not be called a house of prayer for all nations,' but you have made it into a den of thieves." Okay. Another emotion we see frequently that Jesus expresses, sadness. I think another kind of commonly quoted instance is when Jesus' good friend Lazarus died. Jesus knew that he would be raising him from the dead, but he still had a very legitimate human, God-given emotion, sadness. Jesus wept. He had it, he expressed it. And what happens next? Then the Jews commented on it, right? So we see how Jesus had the emotion, expressed the emotion, and communicated the emotion and connected with others with that emotion, right? So we see how Jesus was able to use that emotion in an effective way to communicate something important, right? His sadness communicated love, okay? Another time that God expresses the emotion of sadness is in the book of Genesis after the fall of man. The book of Genesis states that God was sorry. The Lord was sorry that he had made man on earth, and it was grief in his heart. He was hurt. He was feeling sad, regret, right? That was an emotion. Okay. So, why did God give us emotions? What do emotions do for us? The first thing is that emotions kind of very quickly motivate us for action. Okay, so God gave us emotions so that in important situations we can act on them, especially when we don't have time. So like biologically, emotions happen quicker than thoughts. Okay, that's the way kind of our brain is wired. Okay, our brain is wired so more quickly emotions come to the surface than the cognitive part of our brain comes on, like the frontal lobe. Okay, the primitive brain, if you will, is kind of where that happens more rapidly in any given situation. When you're presented with a threat, when something's taken away from you, when you have to make a decision quickly, emotions are your thing, right? They also can help us they're hardwired in a sense. They can also help us overcome obstacles as well. Another really important reason why God gave us emotions is to like what Jesus did. We communicate with others and we influence others with emotions, right? Facial expressions, body language, that's all hardwired, right? There's a lot of science about how 99% of people, a given facial expression is tied to an emotion. There's some wiggle room there, but it's pretty hardwired here. And so why is that important? When we communicate with others what's going on internally, we can connect, we can help understand each other, and that's important for our lives that God wants us to have that, right? God wants us to have community, wants us to be one body. So we can't be a body if we don't know how each of us are doing. So I don't know if you've noticed, in your own relationships, how much you learn to be in tune with the other person. How much that even when they are not saying the thing, you know what's going on, and that's the gift that God gave you in emotion when we use it well. Another thing is emotions communicate to ourselves, right? These gut feelings, these intuitions, these are all gifts that God's giving us that are subtle, sometimes hard to kind of manage, but also really important in lots of situations. It's like when you feel unsure, you feel incompetent, when you feel lonely, these are all things that can motivate you to make a change, to do something differently. This cutie pie animal is the lowland paca that lives in South America. It's very important for the ecosystem. It kind of spreads nuts and berries and seeds everywhere, so a lot of trees really depend on the lowland paca. No, yeah, some of them are really cool, I think, but we're just destroying a lot of environments, which are, so that's just what's happening. Okay, so any questions so far? Or thoughts, comments? Okay, we're gonna get, what's that? Gift. I love that. No, thank you. No, I love that you said thank you for bringing that. No, that's exactly it, right? And so I think if we take the time to kind of learn some skills and think about what Jesus and God does with this gift, we can use it as the blessing that it's meant to be instead of something that becomes an obstacle in our relationships, right? So I think we can all think, I don't want to project on you. For me, myself, I could think of many instances just in the last week where my emotions unregulated have made me do things that I kind of regret, right? Said things, did things, I wish I could take, like that is not the most, that isn't in line with the person I want to be, that isn't godly, right? Not effective and not godly. So those, what we're doing here today is to think about how do we set up a framework, set up a stage, think about some skills we can use so that when we have emotions, we act on them in an effective and godly way. I'm going to repeat those two categories because I think that's the goal here. Okay, what makes it hard to regulate your emotions? First is biology, right? You're hungry, you're tired, you're thirsty, you're overworked, you're stressed with all kinds of other things. That's biology, right? When I was teaching this to a group one time, a group of teenagers, one of the teenagers like asked the question, is like, so does it mean it's harder for me to regulate my emotions because I'm shorter? And I'm like, no, that's not what biology means, sweetie. That's not what we're talking about. We're not talking about height. We're talking about kind of what's going on in your body and your brain that kind of makes you more vulnerable or less vulnerable to making good decisions with your emotions. Another thing is lack of skill. Like, a lot of us just don't know what to do. We're not taught. We're not, practice it, right? And that's why you're here today, so that we can kind of like be more skillful. Next is a reinforcement of emotional behavior. Sometimes your environment reinforces that it's okay to act with emotions in a certain way. And we do that as parents, we do that with each other, right? Sometimes just general moodiness can make it hard and again, that can be tied to biology. Emotional overload, if you've just got a lot going on, any little thing, you can be more sensitive, right? And then the one I really want to spend some time on is the emotion myths. Some of our beliefs about emotions can make it hard for us to regulate because, like in popular culture, in our Coptic culture, in our own family life, there are a lot of just these like myths about how emotions work and what they mean to us that get passed down. This really colorful, dangerous thing is the cuckoo wasp. It's called the cuckoo wasp because it's similar to the cuckoo bird in the sense that it is, I think they call it kleptoparasitic, which means it goes into like other birds' nests and will steal their eggs and steal their food. And but it's beautiful. Yeah. Okay. So, what are some myths about emotions? What I want to do here, I'm going to read this list, and then I want to ask you guys which of these, so I want you to think of this while I'm reading it out loud. Which of these resonate with you? Which do you think you've kind of thought out loud or thought in your head at some point, okay? And then we're going to try to practice challenging these myths, okay? So, 1, there is a right way to feel in every situation. Okay, so right or wrong. 2, negative feelings are bad and destructive. By negative feelings, and we typically are talking about sadness, anger, so on. Anything that's not joy and love, right? 3, being emotional means being out of control. 4, all painful emotions are a result of a bad attitude. 5, it is inauthentic to change my emotions. Kind of saying, emotions are who I am. If I want to change them, that's not me then, right? What number are we? 6, letting others know that I am feeling bad is a weakness. 7, acting on your emotions is the mark of a truly free individual. I can do whatever I want, whatever I feel like, it's me. And emotions can just happen for no reason. Which are some of the ones that that's kind of hit you, struck home? Yeah, so negative feelings are bad and destructive. That one, yeah. Yeah. That's a very common one for men. I think that I think we're sort of taught indirectly that being more real with our inner world, with our emotions, is a weakness or like less masculine, less manly. Yeah. And the negative one, yeah. Like I think we're also taught to vilify sadness, vilify I'd do anything to not do those. I don't want to have those emotions. Bad, not for me. I'm gonna just focus on everything else, right? Yes. Right. So let's take those three. Negative feelings are bad and destructive. What would be a good challenge to that? Yeah. So we can kind of think about how to balance. The challenge can be a balance thought. Something like negative emotions don't feel great, but there's a reason for them, and I can use them for growth. Okay. Nice. What about how could we make a challenge for letting others know that I am feeling bad is a weakness? Yeah. I think another thing too is if you can kind of think about people or role models who are strong. Let's just take Jesus, right? Jesus, does anyone here think Jesus was weak? Right? He conquered death, right? He healed, the worst illnesses, right? He is the definition of strength, and also he exhibited quite a bit of emotion. He's an emotional man, right? He showed us emotion. Was that a weakness? No. That was part of his strength, right? Because he used it for good. He used it for a godly, effective purpose.
I think it's like very general, like all emotions are strong, like it's stronger in men, it's weaker in men in our society, showing emotions.
And I think that's why I want to bring up the example of Jesus. Because no one here can argue that Jesus wasn't he's a man, right? And he's kind of our ideal, right? So I think when we get lost in that kind of gendered nonsense, we can think about Jesus himself showed us that you can be strong in emotions, and you can use the emotions for good. Okay. Just for the interest of time, let's keep going. This is the Irrawaddy dolphin. Also, the habitat being very they're very, very endangered, but they're very funny looking and very cute. They're known for that kind of giant head that's bulbous. Okay. So let's dive a little bit into kind of the first emotion that was brought up today, anger, okay? So what are some other words for anger? Just think about some common words, shout them out. Okay, pissed off, rage, stubbornness, okay, yeah, it can be related, right? Come on, guys. What's that? Hate, yeah, okay. Hate. Mm-hmm. So you could have bitterness, fury, indignation, aggravation, frustration, exasperation, irritation, all kind of anger words, right? Why am I taking a minute to talk about words, about anger? Because the more we take the time to think about, to take stock of our emotions, to have words and language, the better we can use these skills. It'll be useless if you have the emotion of anger, but we don't know it. So what I'm doing here is giving you a few other words to think about what resonates with you. You're I'm not really an angry person, but I do get irritated. That one, I'm an irritable person at times, right? Fine, use irritation, whatever. Use the word that works for you. Not everyone's gonna fit with anger, or maybe some people are anger's a little weak. I'm more of a rage person. Sorry, I didn't even look at you, Pauline. I love you. Okay. Okay. So we have some words. What are some of the common prompting events for feeling angry? And again, we're not talking about this in a bad way. We're talking about this is the way God made us, okay? What are some of the reasons why, biologically, spiritually, we can get angry? Why? Right, okay, you feel out of control, okay? So I think a common one is you have an important goal, okay, that is blocked, that's taken away from you. Or or another one is that something you expected to go a certain way is not going that way, okay? So another one is that someone you care about, yourself or someone else, is being attacked or threatened, okay? So those are all some of the common, God gave us anger in these situations for a reason, okay? So what happens biologically when you experience anger? What happens to your body? heartbeat, hot, heat, what's that? Right, what happens in your sympathetic nervous system? Heart rate, blood pressure, tensing muscles, getting flushed. Why is that important? Fight or flight, awesome. I take the time to mention this because if we're going to talk about how to regulate, we have to talk about the physical things because that's something we can use to control. So when you're talking about your breathing increasing or heart rate increasing, you work on controlling your breathing. When you're getting hot, you use some cold water, you use something to cool yourself down. When you're noticing your muscles being tense, you use skills to relax your muscles intentionally, okay? So you get some biological experiences of anger, and then we have some kind of other expressions of anger. They can be things like blaming, pounding, throwing things, walking out, raising our voice, sometimes using language that isn't ideal, clenching, frowning and not smiling, having a grumpy posture, right? Those are all kinds of like emotional expressions of anger, right? What are some of the after effects of anger? What's that? Yeah. Exhaustion. So you're just kind of worn out from that sympathetic nervous system burst, right? You kind of come down, you get that. And then another thing too that often happens, is specifically with anger versus other emotions, is sometimes we narrow our attention in it. I don't know if you've ever had this experience. After kind of an angry outburst, your mind kind of gets stuck in that anger, like for longer than you'd like it to, right? You kind of narrow in on it. What we call in the psych world ruminating. It's that kind of circle of just thoughts keep going and you kind of build it up. I can't believe she said that. Why would she say that? I can't. Do you think she meant that? You kind of like ruminate, you go down that hole, right? Okay. This is the jaguarundi, also known as the otter cat, because I think some people think it looks a little bit like an otter and a cat. Yeah. It's pretty cute. Yeah. Yes. No, please ask any question anytime. There's no preferred sequence, and some people, they tend to be more effective with one versus the other. So it's more, what I recommend is you try doing both, right? And we're going to talk about some of the thought changes you can do, but we're also going to talk about some of the physical changes you can do. And what you need to do is practice both, figure out what works for you. So some people, their expression of anger is way more physical, right? Their body just changes automatically, they become beast mode, okay? Some people are much more, they don't get as physical, it's more in their mind and their emotional expression of anger. So everybody has kind of a way they lean more, sometimes people more in the middle. You learn what your expression is and what could be more effective in regulating. Does that answer your question? Yeah, okay. All right. So now I want to get into, let's talk about skills of what to do when you want to regulate an emotion, okay? Again, the purpose, I just want to keep hammering this home. The purpose of regulating emotions is so that we use emotions to be effective and godly, that we can make good, God-driven choices and be effective for our goals, okay? Nothing wrong with emotions, but we want to use them to be effective and godly. So there's going to be kind of a list of things. The first thing you want to do before you make a decision of what to do next is what we call check the facts. This is just kind of taking a second to understand how your emotions and your actions are interpreted by the situation. What's actually going on in the situation before you go any further. So this is kind of like, I'm upset that somebody called me a name, right? I want to wait and think, did they actually use that word, or what was the full context of that? Were they trying to be mean? Was it unintentional? You want to stop and think about the actual reality of what's happening, not where you are because of your emotions. So the way thoughts and emotions work is usually there's an event, And sometimes you can have these thoughts that come up and then the emotions come after. Our emotions can have big after effect on our thoughts or events. Sometimes there's an event and then the emotions come up high and then we get thoughts after. We call this the cognitive triangle, and it can kind of go either way. The idea being is you can't control the event, you can't control what your partner did or said to you or how they acted. What you can kind of think about is where your thoughts and your emotions are going and try to regulate those, okay? This really beautiful bird is I'm gonna butcher the name, it's called the Schlegel's acid. I don't know why it's called that, but I really like the beads on its face. All right, so how do we check the facts? Step one, you ask, what is the emotion I want to change, control, or regulate? So this is taking stock of your emotion. Think about what words would you give it, okay? You also want to think about how high it is, okay? Sometimes it's really helpful to think about, I'm at a 10 right now, I'm at a 5, you know, just to kind of get some idea of where you are. Then second is you're checking, what is the event? All right, what I want you to do when you're doing that is act like a neutral detective walking in. Not like someone who's part of the situation, but like someone, like if Sherlock Holmes walked in, what is the actual evidence of what happened? Person A said this, person B said this, and then person A walked out of the room for 5 minutes, and then person B, you know, slammed the door, and, you know, what is the actual, like, just the facts. No emotions in it, okay? Number 3, what are my interpretations, thoughts, and assumptions based on those pure just facts of what happened, okay? So because they slammed the door, they're trying to shut me out of the house, right? That's the interpretation or assumption I made because my partner slammed the door. Or because they slammed the door, they don't want me to enter into the room, so I guess I won't see them for the rest of the night, kind of thing, right? That's where your thought went, but what was the actual thing that happened, okay? Step 4 is you want to assume, am I assuming a threat? You want to ask, am I assuming a threat? You want to label the threat, and then you want to assess the probability that that threat is actually happening, okay? Number 5, what's the catastrophe? Again, this is just kind of taking it step up, right? Like, imagine the catastrophe really occurring. So a common one in relationships is like, I guess I can never, ever talk about this topic ever again. I guess we're just unable to talk about this. In an extreme version, you're like, oh, I guess our partnership is over, right? Like, that's the catastrophe. So I think, I think sometimes when we get so emotional in a fight, our thoughts can go there, right? Like, oh, this will never work, kind of thing, right? But then we have to stop and think, like, is this catastrophe actually like based in reality here, or is this like just kind of where my mind is going, given the emotions that I'm feeling? Okay. And then number 6 is, does my emotion or intensity fit the facts? Sorry, that's what I meant to say. You want to say, does your emotion or intensity fit the facts? So that's kind of the final step. This is when you're bringing it all together. Is okay, maybe I have the right to be angry right now, but maybe a 10 out of 10 of the anger is a little much when, my partner said, please chop up the carrots, right? Like, maybe, maybe it doesn't have to be a 10 out of 10, right? Like, maybe it could be like, like a 4, because I already did it and she didn't acknowledge, or I don't know. Yeah. Oh, but we haven't eaten carrots in a while, don't worry. Huh? Right, no carrots anymore. No. The cat could does. This animal is the tufted ground squirrel. It lives in countries I don't remember the name of because they're hard to pronounce. And it's like they're island nations, and it's known for having the biggest tail to body ratio of any animal. Its tail is 130% of its body length. It's just all tail. Yeah, so that's the tufted ground squirrel. Okay. So let's get into some of the examples of when anger fits the facts. When it's, I'm going to use this word really, really intentionally, justified to have anger. Okay? Justified to have the emotion of anger. 1, when an important goal is blocked or a desired activity is interrupted or prevented. 2, When you or someone you care about is attacked or hurt by others, we talked about this a little bit, but I want to reinforce it. 3, you or someone you care about is insulted or threatened by others. Or 4, the integrity or status of your social group is offended or threatened. Another one that we can think about is like when something is presented that doesn't fit your values, right? Your godly values, your what we believe in, right? That can make us angry, right? Like when something is not right, morally okay, right? Like sin can make us angry, right? Sin makes God angry, right? So sin can also, or should also, make us angry, okay? The intensity and duration of an emotion are justified by how likely the expected outcome is to occur and how great and important the outcome is, and then also how effective emotion is in our life right now, okay? Any questions about that? So again, it's okay to be angry in these situations. Now we think about how do we use that anger to be effective and godly, okay? Now, here's the other thing. If you check the facts and it doesn't fit the facts, there is no important goal being blocked, okay? No one is really being attacked or insulted here at the end of the day. Then you have to think, maybe this anger I'm feeling is not justified. It doesn't fit the facts. And if it's not justified, it's our choice to regulate or not regulate, to work on changing the emotion or to act on it. And it's when we act on an unjustified emotion when we get into the most trouble, okay? So we need to always check and see, is it justified? Would Jesus given a situation, would Jesus want me to feel this emotion? Is it justified? Okay. This animal is the blue glaucus, also known as the blue dragon. It's a nudibranch, which is like those sea slugs, and it is one of the few nudibranchs that can actually like float and swim. So most nudibranchs live on the ocean floor, but this nudibranch actually swallows air bubbles, and then it uses that to kind of like to float around, and it eats creatures that sting. So because of that, it can actually sting itself. So they're actually quite dangerous. So don't hold them if you see them, but they're beautiful. No, they're dangerous to other people. But they actually can choose when to sting, not like a jellyfish or whatever. They're justified in their. If they're justified, they'll sting you. Correct. Thank you for making this relevant. I appreciate it. Any stretch you need to make this relevant. Okay, I want to give some examples of when fear fits the facts as well. Fear can fit the facts, can be a justified emotion when there is an actual threat to your life, right? That's why God gave us fear, so that we can respond to legitimate threats to our life. When there's a threat to health or someone that you care about, or when there's a threat to your well-being. So for legitimate threats, fear is appropriate, right? We're given fear so that if we're faced with like a dangerous animal, we would run away or hide or play dead, fight, flight, or freeze, right? We would do one of those things because to protect our life. Okay, this is the shoebill stork, known for its shoebill. Okay, so if you have checked, here's the kind of the important part of this. If you've checked the facts and your emotion is not justified, it doesn't fit the facts, and or the acting on the emotion the way you naturally would either be ineffective or ungodly, then we have to do what's called opposite action, okay? So this is when you intentionally do the opposite that the urge of the emotion is telling you to do. So every emotion has an action urge, like we talked about. You are angry, the urge is to yell, the urge is to maybe throw things, to walk out, to slam things, right? Those are the urges, to act unkind when you're angry, right? The opposite action is the opposite of those urges. And so let me give you some examples. Before we do that, this is the Matschi's tree kangaroo. So did you know there's some kangaroos that live in trees? Yeah, well, this one does. And so examples of opposite action. So let's just go with the anger one first. If your emotion is anger, the action urge is to attack. That's what we are naturally, our urge to do is when we're angry. The opposite action would be to withdraw, to be gentle, to avoid, to be a little nice, to just to do the opposite of that in-your-face attack, but to bring it back. Okay? So fear would be to run away or avoid. When you're scared of something, you want to avoid it, right? Opposite action, if there's really nothing to be afraid of, okay, if it's not justified, what we really want to try to do is approach, to face it, right? This is what we talk about, facing our fears. This is psychologically sound, right? Because it is, that's how we teach ourselves that this was not justified. So with sadness, we want to withdraw, isolate. When we're feeling sad, when we want to do opposite action, we actually get active. You do things. You don't lock yourself in a dark room. You go out into the sunlight and you be with people if you can. Shame, you want to hide, avoid, keep the secret to yourself. No, you want to let it into the light, right? You want to confess about it. You want to tell someone about it, okay? All right, so that's some examples of opposite action. So I want to kind of talk about kind of the process, like going a little deeper into how to use opposite action. Since we've been talking about anger, we're going to stick with anger. Wait, did I talk about the animal? No, there's no animal. Okay, we're good. Just don't want to miss an animal for you. Okay, so the first thing you want to do is you want to gently avoid the person you were angry with rather than attacking them. Now that doesn't mean that you are just going to rudely walk out of the room. What that means is you're going to avoid engaging, okay? So you want to use skills to bring down the anger first before you engage. That's what opposite action teaches us. And again, we're using opposite action when our emotions are unjustified, and when they're going to be ineffective or ungodly, okay? So if we've deemed that this emotion acting on this emotion is going to be ineffective for my goals or ungodly, then you use this. You gently avoid. You take a time out. You breathe in deeply and slowly, right? So there's lots of ways to do the deep breathing. Some people do like the belly breathing. Sometimes it's helpful to kind of have like a physical, you just put your hands on your belly and you kind of feel it rise and go down. Some people want to time your breathing paradoxically. By that means you want to breathe in for half the time you're breathing out. So you breathe in, you count for 5, you breathe out, you count for 10. You breathe in, you count for 5, you breathe out, you count for 10. So that's the paradox. So there's different kind of methods you can use. You use what works for you. Other physical things you could do, like we talked about, is the cold water. There's this thing called the diving reflex. If you put something cold on your face and you take a deep breath and hold your breath and you go down really quickly, okay, that physiologically will decrease your heart rate. So if you're noticing your heart is just beating really fast, you're trying to bring down your heart rate, you know, it might be kind of goofy to be like, excuse me, we'll talk about what you said in a second. I have to go get an ice pack. But you know, if it works for you, yeah.
It's super fair to notify yourself. Like,
Yes.
I need a 10 now. I need just a moment to recalibrate.
Did you guys hear that? Right? So that like, okay, yeah, because this is the important thing now.
It's just super appropriate to notify the other person when you're angry and you're like calming down. Say, hey, I need a minute, or else I'm going to annihilate you, right? It's just love that you recalibrate and then you do your thing.
This assumes my either lack of either justified or not justified. But in that example, we said, okay, it shouldn't be a level 10 anger, but level 4 is appropriate. So if it's somewhat justified, then do I turn on the opposite, reaction? If it is okay for me to be a little bit angry, would I be halfway opposite? Do you know what I'm saying? Like, how do you reconcile the black and white, either it's justifiable or not, versus the scale? That's my question.
Awesome. Thank you for that question, and thank you for your wisdom. Oh yeah, this is terrible. Okay, so when it comes to, you're right, things are just not black and white, right? There isn't a binary, it's either justified or unjustified always. There's the scale. I think the other question that in the checking the facts that I haven't really drilled home but is worth really talking about is acting on it effective, right? So you may be justified you have a 4 out of 10 anger because of the situation, you've checked the facts, this feels right. But if I were to act on it the way I naturally would or I feel driven to, would it be what I want to do as a partner? Would it be what I want to do as a father? Would it be what I want to do as a son or as a friend, right? Is this the kind of thing that God would want me to act on in an effective way? If it's like, yes, but maybe I need to use opposite action just to turn down the heat a little so I can make a good decision, that's good. So for instance, it doesn't mean, if I'm justified and angry, it doesn't mean I let it go. Maybe I need to make it clear to my partner, this is not okay, I'm not gonna stand for this, and we need to figure out a way to make this right. So maybe I need to stand up for what needs to happen in that moment, right? But I need to do that in an effective way. So I need to maybe use some opposite action so that I'm calm enough to use those words in a clear, kind, loving way that's effective that my partner will hear. And also use opposite action to the point of maybe it's kind of like, I know what I need to say, but if I say it right now, they're not gonna hear me. So maybe the opposite action gives you some time and some space so that you can make the decision to have that conversation, to act on that anger when it's gonna be effective. Does that answer the question? Okay. All right, and this is the Vietnamese mossy frog, because it looks like it has moss on it. It's a really good camouflage. It was hard for me to pick. There's so many great animals that are just great with camouflage. Yeah, like some bugs that look like sticks and trees and everything, but okay. So if you're justified in your action and it is, but you don't know exactly what to do with that emotion, I think the third skill that we want to talk about is the problem solving. So this is just very kind of like logical and intuitive, but this is kind of when you're turning on your left brain, your logical cognitive brain. When you're thinking about, okay, what's the problem here? I need my partner to understand that I am allergic to carrots, and that every time they put carrots in my food, it makes me feel sick, right? I don't know, whatever. I don't know why I'm thinking of such dumb examples, but bear with me. So, that's the problem. So what are the facts? Make sure I'm identifying the correct problem. Then you want to identify your goal. Okay, what is it I want here? I don't want to make my partner feel like never cook again. I don't want to make my partner feel bad. I just want carrots to not be in the food that they make, right? So that's my goal. Not trying to degrade them, not to make them feel like a bad cook, not to make sure my kid doesn't eat carrots, but to make sure I'm not exposed to carrots for my health. Okay? Then number 4, then you brainstorm lots of solutions. What are some of the ways I could communicate that? What are some ways that we could make sure that there's a carrot space and a not carrot space? What are some of the solutions? And then what you want, when you have a list of like 10 or as many solutions as you could think of, then you want to pick the top one or the top 1 or 2 if you don't know, or 3. And then when you've picked the top ones, step 5 is to choose the solution, but you want to think of like the pros and cons, and that will help you choose the one you're going to act on first. So now I have solution A is to make it so that there's only one drawer in the fridge where carrots are kept, and there's one cutting board where carrots are allowed to be used. That's solution A. Solution B is ban carrots from ever entering the house. They're not allowed to be bought. If a carrot enters, then there will be consequences. That's solution B. So what are the pros and cons of solution A and solution B? And you're gonna kind of like think about that. Okay, I think solution A seems more middle of the road, will kind of be more effective with my partner. Let's give that a go. So you put that into action, you communicate how to do that as effectively as you can, and then you evaluate the results. This actually worked. I haven't eaten carrots in a month and I feel great. I'm not taking Benadryl anymore. That's wonderful. Right, so that's problem solving. This is the saiga antelope. It's known for having a ridiculous nose, just completely uncalled for. Okay. All right, so we're almost done here. So let me just review really quick before we talk about this next part. Again, step one, we're checking the facts, okay? Then after you've seen, is my emotion justified or unjustified, okay? Then if it's justified, then you figure out, is it gonna be effective and godly to act on it? If so, act on it. If not, problem solve how to act on it appropriately, okay? If it's not justified, okay, then we need to figure out how to regulate that emotion. And that's by using opposite action, okay? And you get into a place where your emotion is more regulated so that you can make a decision that is going to be effective and godly for your goals. Okay? Any questions about all that?
I have one question.
Yes.
I have the word justify.
Yes.
So that's kind of not, like, it's somewhat of a dependent.
Yes.
On, like, if Brittany and I were married, like, and then we both were, and I thought that, this was, that my anger was justified, but she was like, no, you're out of the question, this is not justified.
Right.
How would you?
So when you have different like thresholds for what's just justified and what's not justified.
So the word facts, that's checking the facts.
Yes.
Sometimes facts are not seen the same way by two different people.
Sure.
But they both think that like their idea is a fact. Let's say Irene thinks a fact is one thing.
Why are you avoiding this?
Well, thank you. Thank you for that question with multiple layers. Thank you for that.
The reason I ask is it inappropriate for you to tell your spouse that they're not justified in feeling the way they feel?
I think what sometimes happens when you have these differences I think it's helpful to kind of sit and if you can, so first regulate your emotion to the point where you can do this. You sit and be like, okay, let's take turns telling this story from the beginning to the end with as much just the facts, not my feelings, not your feelings, from the beginning to the end. So, you would take a turn being like, okay, you entered the house like 30 minutes late. I wasn't aware that you were going to, so I had made dinner earlier and now it is cold. So you're just kind of listing from your perspective what happened start to finish. And then your partner would okay, now that's my perspective on what happened. All right, the partner gets a chance to tell the story like they're telling somebody that's never seen it before, like describing a scene from start to finish. Okay, well, I texted you, but I guess it didn't go through to let you know I was running late because of work. I got home, and when I entered, you had raised your voice because you were upset that the dinner was cold. I had tried to communicate that, whatever. So, it would be, just checking the facts, and then what you would do is see how much of it you could agree on. Okay, we both agree that I was 30 minutes late. We both agree that the dinner got cold. We both agree, right? So that based on that, you can build a starting point. What is it that we have different perspectives on? And then what I want you to do is once you've regulated your emotion enough, you could say is it possible that their perspective also has some weight? That maybe the fact that they saw I missed the first round because I was in my own world, right? And now that they're calmly able to communicate the facts as they see them, I could enter that in as one of the possible facts, and vice versa. Does that make sense? Okay. Now, that is as easy to do as finding a saiga antelope. Okay, right? They're also very rare, and they're going extinct. Okay. So, any other questions?
I just have another comment. If you go back to the slide with the fuzzy green thing, yes, that you have to keep camouflaged. I think that time and place is really important, and I think doing all these steps is very necessary. But approaching somebody when they are able to hear it can be a different time and place, right? So Mina and I'm giving you a real life example. Mina has to be, when something goes down, he has to address it immediately. And I like to address things not in public. So he has to kind of camouflage his emotions for quite a while till we're not in public to be able to address these very justified emotions. But it takes a lot of self-discipline to approach your partner when they are able to hear it. Because if he addresses it in public, I am not able to hear it, and then the situation escalates and gets far worse. So it is, I mean, this animal, I mean, it's not perfect.
Add one other
Please do.
comment, which I think is really important, and that's, I think it's important to validate and reframe. So even, that's why I think I was bringing up the justified, because there's sometimes you might not think it's justified, but if that person in front of you thinks it's justified, like when me and Arini like get into a fight, like it's good to validate and then reframe.
So let me clarify too. So when I'm talking about justified, I'm not talking about for you have to be justified by the other person's standards. It's by your standards. Am I justified given my what I'm feeling? And that's important to do first, because oftentimes we're just not. If we really take stock and we check our own facts, I'm not justified. If you are justified with your own feelings, then you ask the second question: how do I act on this to be godly and effective? And if your natural instinct is to act in a way because the emotion is so high that is not going to be effective or godly, meaning the time is not right, the place is not right, the method you would communicate is not right, then you need to regulate, right? And then you can get to a point where you can talk about how do you come to the same be on the same page with what's justified, what's not. Yeah, for sure. Yeah. Yes. Yeah. I don't know if I have like a genius answer to that, but what do you think about this idea? Be something like, first you get yourself to a point where you feel like you can engage, right? Like if your timeline is ready, then you approach your partner and you say, there are things I want to discuss about, I'm ready to do that. Is now a good time, or should we delay it? Or would there be a better time or place for this conversation? So what you're doing is you're saying, whoever's ready first, they can kind of say, I'm ready now, but up to you if we do this now, or if you need more time, space, skills first. So it's a kind of like, I don't know if that would be too much of bringing this up and being antagonizing, but it's actually more kind of like, I want to do this, it's kind of approaching this like, I want to do this effectively, I want to do this right. I want to remember that you're my partner, and I want to know when you can do this in an effective way. That'd be something we could try, yeah. Okay, any other comments, questions? Okay. Well, let me talk about the last thing, which is not using the skills when our emotions are not regulated, but kind of setting up the stage so that you have like kind of doing the heavy, the lifting the weights of the mind, of the emotions, to kind of get yourself strong, doing the physical exercise, so when you are put in those circumstances, you're more ready and able to be able to act the way you'd like to. So you set yourself up for emotional success. The acronym that I'm using here is called ABC, please. So A stands for accumulate positive emotions and spiritual experiences. So positive emotions meaning that you are, doing pleasant things in the short term. You're also making changes in your life so that you have long-term positive things going on. So that there's just general positive energy coming in your life. Also, from a spiritual context, also accumulating spiritual positivity, meaning engaging in the disciplines of the church, in spiritual disciplines, things like prayer, Bible reading, using your gebeah, utilizing the sacraments, taking communion, being in a spiritual community. Those are things that are going to build your positive emotions up. Then the second thing is you want to build mastery. You want to have some competence, some confidence, both emotionally, but also building mastery by doing things that make you feel less helpless and less hopeless. Okay, and then 3, you want to cope ahead of time with emotional situations. So particularly if you know there's like a go-to emotion for you and a go-to expression of that emotion, you want to cope ahead by preparing, right? Like, I know this is what typically happens in these kinds of situations that come up every so often. How do I plan? How do I know what to expect, right? And then the next thing is the please part, which is really taking care of your mind by taking care of your body. So treating any physical illnesses you have, balancing your eating, balancing your sleep, getting exercise, and avoiding things that are mood altering. And sometimes for some people also that includes caffeine, honestly, for anxiety and anger type things. So to avoid those kinds of things and to really treat your physical health as part of your mental and spiritual health as well. And these are the Spanish dancer sea slugs. When they move, I don't have a video of it, but they kind of their little flaps move like a Spanish dancer, like a flamenco dancer. You should check a video out there. No, these nudibranchs are now on the water, but when they do move, they kind of look like a dancer. Okay. Any questions, thoughts, comments? I know this was long, but thank you for bearing with this whole presentation and for your engagement. But any questions, thoughts, things you'd like to discuss? Oh, this is the Jeffrey tamarin. It's a tamarin. It's a type of tamarin called the Jeffrey's tamarin. Yeah. A tamarin is a kind of monkey. Yeah. I just think they're really, really ugly cute. I couldn't resist not putting them up there. But I think in all of that, right, also utilizing skills that the church teaches us, like using the sign of the cross, using an arrow prayer, using a particular prayer that can kind of help center you and take the time to regulate. Those are all really important things to utilize as well. Yeah.
In that vein, is there a practical, everything that you described in terms of things you should do for anger, things you should do, lists you can make. We're talking about that like a process, but the reality is it happens in a blink.
It happens in a blink.
Is there a practical tip you can give, maybe one to just stop yourself dead in the tracks to prevent the further?
Yeah, I think. Okay, yeah. Okay, I'll repeat. So what Susanna was saying is we're talking about this whole process that is actually takes some time, right, and takes a lot of intentionality. But when we're talking about emotions, they're much quicker, and especially in conflict with relationships, these things are happening at milliseconds, not minutes, these kinds of things. It's a different time process. How do we kind of practically stop things? Put a timer, make the clock fit. Is that kind of your question? So my answer to that is, I think one of the best things you can do with your partner is, or with anybody that you need to improve your communication with, is figure out a signal. So that either you tell your partner or your partner tells you of this is a timeout button. I need a second. So first you have to be able to pay attention. Okay, I think I need a second. So it could be a word you say. It could be just remember we talked about this? I need a second. It could just be that reminder you say right away when you feel your emotions going to its end and you need to use some skills. you're verbalizing it. Or if that's hard to do because you know if any words coming out of your mouth right now they'll be ineffective or ungodly, you can have a physical signal that you agree with, touching the nose, like whatever it is. It's kind of like just like that with a deep breath, whatever you decide. So I think it's helpful for partners to come up with a signal ahead of time, something that you both agreed. This means that we're going to put a pause on whatever's happening and take a second to get our bearings until we can re-engage. Is that helpful?
It's very helpful.
Okay. Any other questions? Yeah. When am I coming back? There's going to be really good speakers for the series, so I encourage you to continue. I think it can. So it sounds like it'll be every third Sunday of the month. Yeah. So please keep coming, and we'll keep learning together. Yeah.
Thank you so
Okay.
much, Mina.
Thank you.
Thank you guys for coming, and obviously thank you, Mina, for such a beautiful and very applicable talk. So the goal is that we will hopefully be meeting every third Sunday after church, just like this. This is our first meeting, so we'll kind of, I'm welcoming any suggestions or ideas that you guys might have. The third Sunday of every month, yeah. And if there's like a feast or something, like the next month, the third Sunday is actually Easter, so we would probably do the following Sunday. So we'll work around the feasts. The format that we're currently going for is speakers like Mina. So if anybody, feels they have a specific topic that they are comfortable talking about, that's great. And then otherwise, we'll encourage couples to maybe partner up and read a book together. We have a list of books, and read a book together and present it. So Peter and I will take the next talk. So in April, we will be presenting on the book. What's our book called, Peter? Seven Principles of Making Marriage Work. It's a wonderful book, so we're looking forward to sharing that with you guys. And thank you for coming. Any suggestions or ideas would be very helpful. Thank you. You may go. You may go. Oh my gosh, what is that stupid doing?
We're going home with 18 minutes. certain part.